Pleading with the tongue like
that? Did you see? Look, there's lots of tongue in there. Lots of tongue in there.
This is probably like one of the most high-res character models out there just because
crazy.
it's so big.
Look, ooh, she looks bad there.
I love it. This is exactly why we have this show.
The whole pipeline for something so intense like this is just, it's overwhelming to me to consider.
A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, Padawan.
Hey, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of Visual Effects Artists React. We have a very, very special guest today. We have Tim Miller on the couch with us. Thank you so much for joining us.
I think he wins the enthusiasm contest.
Oh, come on.
Yes. He brought the 12-year-old boy energy to this process in a way that you did not.
Yeah. What can I say? I'm just a mature guy.
I'm the 12-year-old. He's like the 15-year-old, too cool for you older brother.
Yeah.
Tim, you founded this tiny little indie studio called Blur. You also did this little like startup movie called Deadpool. You did like a Terminator thing, like small stuff, right?
You forgot Love, Death, and Robots.
Oh my God, dude, Love, Death, and Robots, you're totally right. I watched season 1 probably like 3 full times, and seasons 2 and 3 I've only watched once, I'm afraid to say.
That's all right. That's all right. Season 2 doesn't get the love it deserves. They're all my children, so I love them all. But season 2 just didn't get the love. I don't know why.
Tim's been very much a part of my CG artist life since I got into 3ds Max with version R3. I watched all your shorts, all the animations you guys did. I was constantly trying to scrutinize and figure out how you were getting global illumination and ambient occlusion and good shaders and all that kind of stuff, because none of that existed back when I got into it. And
cheating, that's the answer. It was all cheating.
During the 2000s, my favorite videos were the video game cinematics, like trailers and whatnot, like World of Warcraft, Halo, what else was there? It was like freaking DC stuff. It was all my favorite stuff.
DC Universe was the job that got me Deadpool.
Was it really?
Yep.
It's really interesting that you ended up in this realm of game cinematics because it's a brand new medium, right? It was basically invented in the 90s and then like has grown to become this thing where it's like it's not quite movies and it's not quite video games, it's video game cinematics and it sits in the middle there, but it still has characters and storytelling and direction, but you were at the start of that. I cannot wait to hear your stories.
We looked at some old cinematics for another reason the other day. I've forgotten whole chunks of my life. I watched this Hellgate cinematic that at the time I relived it while I was watching it, and it was just traumatic. It was so huge at the time. It was like we worked on it ever, and I've forgotten all about it. I don't even think about it anymore, and it was so important at the time.
What was like the software of choice for stuff like this?
This is all Max. Max in Digital Fusion for compositing, and ZBrush didn't exist, so it was just modeled traditionally. This was one of the first games where we could really nobody was going to go, hey, wait a second, that's too violent, or that's too bloody. Ooh, that's not a good shot. The face is not good.
What stands out to you about the face?
The nose is too pinched and the forehead is too wide, and I don't know. It just looks
very aggressive brow.
It looks super CG. Like, ooh, she looks bad there. There's like no specular on the skin. It's like, look at it. It looks like she's made out of chalk or something. Sorry.
She's very powdered up.
No, I love it.
Sorry, Jed.
I love it. This is exactly why we have the show.
Jed would say the same thing. But at the time, we were like, oh my God, she's amazing. Oh, by the way, hold on. That's my face on top of that.
Right there?
Yes.
That's
really?
That's my face. They scanned, which was a little
The resemblance
surprise.
is uncanny.
If you saw it on a turntable, you'd notice it right away. They used a scan of me because they thought it was funny, I think. I'm going to go with it was a sign of respect.
At what point did you consider yourselves like a professional animation studio?
I'm not sure I do yet.
All right.
Okay then.
It never feels like a job. I mean, I can honestly say, even at the worst of times, there's never been a day where I was like, man, I just don't want to go in today. And because of that, it doesn't feel like a job, you know? I guess when I would say it feels like that is, especially in the beginning, there probably wasn't a year that didn't have at least 1 or 2 sphincter tightening weeks where it's like, if this job doesn't come in, we're going to have to lay people off. I didn't know it at the time, but we were bidding on Dante's Inferno. And I thought, okay, well, if we get this, we're okay. The orphanage had been awarded the job, but they filed for bankruptcy and had to go out of business.
Oh, wow.
And so we got the job by default, but I didn't know that at the time, or I would have been myself. If that piece of luck hadn't happened, I don't know, maybe some other one would have, or maybe I would have had to finally face that crowd of people and say, sorry.
The true innocent has given way to the sins of man.
I'm a big fan of smoke simulations, and there's been a lot so far here.
Who now can deny me my rights?
Did you see that tongue?
like
Did you see? Look, there's lots of tongue in there. Lots of tongue in there. The cheapest but most usable trick in the book to make the shots look rich is a little bit of smoke comped in with some sparks flying around.
Just like once your render's done, you're like, smoke and sparks.
It just gives it all this depth. Like, well, there's a good example of
without
the depth, and it feels flat. I wasn't a good one, but I enjoyed the compositing process quite a lot.
I enjoy compositing too. It's like you're actually finishing everything. It's the last stage. You put the final touches. It's like putting the icing on a cake.
I wasn't very good at it. In fact, my Quake name was Cheese Filter because Digital Fusion has this filter where it'll put the little 5-pointed star on the highlights. Okay. I love that filter, and I would put it on everything, and the guys were like, dude, why do you put that cheesy filter? So my Quake name was Cheese Filter. But I liked every part of the process, you know. Back in the old days, you did every part. When I did shots on Johnny Mnemonic, I did everything.
So we've been touching upon a lot of these awesome films that you've worked on, but we have not touched upon what I think is one of your most significant contributions to the world of animation, which is Love, Death, and Robots.
Which I might also add has been traditionally our most requested thing to look at through the entirety of our show.
Is it because people want you to bag on it?
No.
The way you bagged on Sonic, like a bunch of
YouTubers just looking for attention.
YouTube spineless wannabe visual effects people. No.
Hurt me more, Daddy. That's the kind of relationship you have to have with the internet, you know?
You don't get that much from me. I'm glad you said that. Love, Death, and Robots is probably the most important thing I feel that I've been a part of because it fully engages Blur, which I'm very passionate about. And like I said, I'm an animator first and foremost, so you know my love is animation.
The vast proportions of his features.
I really like the Drowned Giant too because it reminded me a lot of like the Caldecott winner, like the really fancy illustrated children's books that you get from the library once in a while.
Oh yeah, like Polar Express. Those.
Yeah, exactly. Like this very much feels like one of those books brought to life. Like kind of surreal, a little sad, perhaps a touch dark for kids, but a great excuse to make cool paintings in a book.
I imagine there had to have been a ton of work going into all like the micro details of everything about this. This is probably like one of the most high-res character models out there just because
crazy.
It's so big. What I love.
Look at the skin texture.
Yeah, the skin texture is so nice. The detail around all of, I mean, the pores aren't stretching because he's dead, but like the pores are there. Sorry, that was a bit of an inside joke.
Yeah. And it's like, what does a nipple hair look like when it's
scaled up?
You know, when it's as thick as a corn stalk. And water on the beach, which, you know, you couldn't even do a few years ago.
What is the hardest thing right now to do in CG?
I still think it's people's faces.
Okay, sorry, that's too easy of an answer.
Yeah.
Not counting people's faces.
A few years ago, I would have said water, but I think they've pretty well conquered that. I don't know. I don't think anything's beyond CG artists these days. Yeah, that's kind of sad now that you pointed out.
Is that sad?
Well, maybe a little.
Because it kind of removes some sort of like
the challenge,
thing to strive towards?
The challenge of it.
There was nothing morbid about this, because for all intents, the giant was still alive for me.
When I first started watching this, at points I was like, I'm pretty sure this was filmed. Like, it looks like real landscapes and whatnot.
We were going to shoot it.
You're going to shoot this for real?
We were going to shoot it, yeah. We had multiple plans that started with going over to the UK to shoot it, and then the last ones we were making were to go to New Zealand. And Sean Haworth was a production designer on Terminator, and Sean and I sort of figured out we were going to build parts for the actors to walk on and all kinds of stuff.
Okay.
So we had a whole plan, and I was actually looking really forward to shooting it. And then we couldn't. And then we had to do the mocap, and then the pandemic happened. Oh! And, you know, the mocap, Digic, our friends who did one of my favorite LDR episodes, Secret War, their mocap stage was still working. So I directed mocap via an iPad in Hungary, which was not easy, but doable.
Some weeks elapsed before my next journey to the beach, and by then any human likeness held by the giant had vanished.
It's a little weird when you try and tell, so what happens in your story? Well, this giant washes up on the beach. Over a period of weeks, he rots, and then people forget he was ever there. What's it mean? What do you want it to mean? I could say something like it's a meditation on life, and I couldn't even tell you why it stuck with me, but I read it. My dad had this book, Chronopolis and Other Stories, in his library, and I found it, and I read the story, and I always remembered it. My wife said the other day, she's like, you're always going on about story, like story's so important. She's like, why don't you do just a straight up action piece for the next Love, Death, and Robots? And I had to think about it for a second, and then I thought, I've done so much action in my career that I think it just wasn't a challenge anymore. I enjoy it, but it wasn't a challenge, whereas story is hard. Swarm is a good example.
Welcome.
Dr. Mirny, an honor to meet you.
Bruce Sterling's original story is really rich, and I think why I love it is because there's a lot of philosophical conversations about technology and hubris and humanity and what we believe. And I tried to put all that stuff in the script, and then I just ended up cutting it out because it just doesn't work in this form.
Interesting.
You just don't want to sit there and have people monologue like I'm doing now in this interview.
But that's like, that was
which
what
is going to be boring, and you're going to edit the out of this. Right? I have talked for 4 hours, ladies and gentlemen, and when you see it, it's going to be 20 minutes.
No, it's going to be 2 episodes of 20 minutes.
And still boring.
The Swarm is a near perfect organic system. With a resource like this, we can bring order to the chaos of human expansion.
This episode, I loved the sci-fi concept of you have like this alien race that has existed for millions of years, and the hubris of humans being like, oh, we could use this.
Yeah.
And then being like, nah, there's a reason we've been around for 1,000,000 years. You just don't realize it yet.
I have no name, but you may address me as Swarm.
It was such a good moment in the story. And a little bit about Bruce Sterling. He wrote this one, and I tried to get Swarm in season 1. Bruce wouldn't respond to me. I think some authors feel like, you know, I wrote the story, and that's really what I wanted to do. I don't care about this stuff. And to be fair, most of the time people would it up. Mm-hmm. And I can't say that I didn't, that his story was not much better than my short, because it is. And which is in our books. We published all the original short stories from Cohesion Press, and you can get it on Amazon. Netflix doesn't make any money on it. We don't make any money on it. All the money goes to the authors and publishers.
Oh, sick. Okay.
Because I want people to read the original stories that inspired them. And in the cases of like Hibaro, where there was no original story, there's only like 3 or 4 of those. We have the scripts.
So you start with the script, and you have all like these elements. You got to go through and I guess concept art, what everything looks like. Then there's the whole process of converting that into actual assets that can be used. The whole pipeline for something so intense like this is just, it's overwhelming to me to consider.
A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, Padawan. You're right, it is overwhelming when you look at it this way, but I don't consider myself a writer, but I did the adaptation to this, and when I do that for these, I just take the original prose and I just put it in final draft in script format, and then I just start cutting it down. There's differences between scripts and prose, and turn all the inner monologue into active dialogue, or change a scene to get an idea across visually. And then you get, like, this moment was not in the novel, but it's one of my favorite moments, where I'm like, this is the time when she's going to see the glory of what this thing is in the Swarm.
So Blur obviously did several episodes in these 3 seasons so far, but so did a ton of other studios. Why not do everything through Blur? Why give the creative freedom entirely to a bunch of other studios to make these episodes happen?
Funny you should ask. There's a lot of reasons for that. The first one is, I used to have this dream of building an animation empire. I no longer have that dream. I'm quite happy with the size that Blur is, which is, about 105, 110 staff. But I don't want to manage a company of 400 or 500 people. You get to a point where it's just cogs in the machine, and I don't like that. Plus, I think the variety is the key for this show, and it's great to get other artistic perspectives. There's a lot of amazing studios all around the world. Most of them are competitors in the game cinematic market, so we know them, and they're friends, and they're very passionate about doing this kind of thing, and so why not enlist them in the effort? And it worked out really well. Originally, Love, Death, and Robots, I thought would be a little more kumbaya, a little like artists would come in. We had animators come in and pitch us stories, and it worked out well with Alberto, but that was about it.
Really? Okay.
It's just much better if I find the stories and we develop them, because then development is hard. At least if you start with a short story, you know it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
And you can build on it. This one's great. This is Robert Valley did Zima Blue and Ice. Rich Larson wrote Ice. It's a great story. I changed the ending, but it's a great story. It was a little depressing. The brothers they hated each other at the end. I'm like, I can't have that. I like heroic stories, generally speaking, even if they're dystopic.
I feel like it's too easy to end a story on a negative note. Because like you always need your drama, like it takes you there, but it's easy to just be like, okay, that drama's unresolved and things are bad at the end. It's like, no.
Yeah.
Like, let's get somewhere.
That's the thing with shorts. Like, I like those little slice of life things where you don't have to tie everything up in a knot, but I think you get a feeling for when you do. You remember that movie, The Net, with Sandra Bullock? Mm-hmm. At the beginning of that movie, the Columbia logo comes up and a cursor comes across and it clicks on the Columbia woman and she fuzzes out and it goes into some, hacking looking titles. And I used some, Kai's power tools plug-in to do it, but it worked. Oh, I remember these. This is terrifying. Seeing these shots. I did 11 shots. All of my shots are the cyberspace shots. What's your favorite stories? And don't make them be ones I directed.
Zima Blue is one of my favorites. Sonny's Edge was a fun one I liked a lot. Swarm was one of my favorites in the third season.
Pander. Don't pander.
That was, no, like, ask my wife. She knows that I liked that one. We got a lot going on here at Corridor at the moment, so if you're missing out by not subscribing, maybe consider not missing out by subscribing.
So we got this big old YouTube studio, but it started with me and Sam wanting to make videos, and now we have like 20 people working here. You have a big old studio, now you got like 100 people working for you. How do you hold on to still getting to be a filmmaker or storyteller or animator while also running a company?
You have to have good people that are as passionate about the other aspects of the business as you are. So there's the people management skill, which you have to keep people happy, and then there's the business. I'm lucky that I don't give a about money, but the job is primarily keeping your employees happy and paid, and then you get to do that cool.
Well, I'm definitely surrounded by some of the best people I could ever hope to be surrounded by here, so I guess I'm on the right track.
I also have learned that 85% of the people will appreciate what you do and the way you try and run the company. The other 15% will never appreciate it. I feel like I've always made the best decision for everybody, which doesn't mean it's the best decision for everybody, but I always try and do it for the greater good, for whatever we do.
That was really great advice. Thank you for sharing.
So I know, we've now finally looked at Love, Death, and Robots a lot, so all of you leaving those comments probably don't know what to do with your lives anymore. Well, guess what? You can still leave comments. I mean, yeah, it just takes a little bit of time to get around to some of these things, but we do read the comments to get ideas for what to look at, so your comments matter. Thank you.
Tim, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it was my pleasure. I enjoy people that enjoy the work that I enjoy.
But in all honesty, it's been a big moment for me to actually be able to meet you and talk to you.
Stop.
Serious?
I'm uncomfortable with that.
Come on.
So you can stop.
I was like one of the two other people that learned 3ds Max. We're like animation.
3ds Max brothers unite. You know what? One of the nicest things that you'll appreciate this, but when Love, Death, and Robots came out, Gary Ost called me, who invented 3D Studio. For those of you who don't know, and Gary's like, I'm so proud.
That's awesome.
That was very meaningful to me.
Well, that wraps up just a casual Tuesday for us here. I guess it's Thursday.
It's not even
it's
Tuesday.
So casual.
Wait, it's Thursday. What day is
This
it?
is just like, whatever.
When you love your work, time seems to stop.
Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you in the next one.